All right. This last bullet point, we could spend multiple podcasts just on this. So I want to keep it brief. We'll go me and Isaiah, and then Robert's got a special slide. I'm just going to keep it very brief and say, look, if you objectively wanted to identify the four best or the four most deserving, we have to say it needs to be the four most deserving, because the four best devalues the regular season, which is the gem of this sport, that the regular season matters. So it needs to be the four most deserving. And if you're going to do an exercise that it tries to identify either a four best or four most deserving, no person that understands this thing would invite any of the 13 people on that committee. That, I think, is the biggest crime. They don't have the intellectual horsepower as it relates to this subject matter to really ask bigger questions like, what's our objective criteria? Are we using the right metrics, et cetera, et cetera? And that's why we are where we are. I think the focus needs to be on, let's actually, if it's not going to be on who's pulling the strings or whatever, I don't know if that's what's at fault here or not, but we need to have actual people that can do this correctly, because these people are just a joke. To Isaiah's point, it's just, what's the rationale du jour? End of my sermon. You go ahead, Isaiah, if you have anything more on this one.
Yeah, it's just, this is why at least for me, when it comes to the postseason, I have loved March Madness so much more. And it's not just because there's more teams, so you're getting more parity, because you don't, like, when they're seeding the NCAA tournament bracket, they're not just looking at a team and saying, you know what, they look a little bit better, so we're going to put them. Like, there are so many objective criteria, and yeah, maybe you don't like all the tricks. That's fair. That's a fair discussion. But I'm not putting a team in because I think they look better. And to my experience in basketball, if I was asked to be put on a committee to put teams in based on how they look, I would say no, I can't do that. I'm a referee. I'm not here. I don't play. I don't like, it's not, that's not my experience. So I have a problem with 13 suits that have never played this game before, or if they haven't played it in 40 years, trying to sit here and tell me that some teams are just inherently better than others, and then lie about it. But if he just came out and said, or if Boo Corrigan came out and just had said, look, we think that Florida State gets blown out in the first round and we want a good game, so we're going to put Alabama in. Okay, I disagree, but at least you're being honest with me. But if you're going to sit here and tell me that everything we looked at says you have to put Alabama in, but we haven't done that for the past 9 years. You put TCU in last year when I very strongly would have said there were better teams than TCU, but TCU deserved it. And you put them in, and they beat Michigan in the first round. Nobody gave TCU a chance to beat Michigan in the first round, and they put up 50-some points on one of the best defenses in college football. So it's just, it devalues the regular season. It devalues the postseason, and I just feel sick for the Florida State people, because I don't care that first game was going to be probably a blowout, because we watch college football for the chance that it wasn't going to be a blowout. And the other thing, too, is I had Alabama people and I had other people say, if all the games count, then why didn't the SEC championship game count, right? Because you wanted Florida State in, but Alabama beat Georgia. And I'm like, but it did count, because that gave you the chance to get in if Florida State had lost. If you had lost to Georgia, you don't get in any circumstances. That's why that game counted. But the Texas one basically did it, which you lost at home by 10 points. And then somehow Florida State without their quarterback, gets ranked ahead of Georgia, because I guess they're going to beat Georgia. Oh, wait, what's the spread for that game? So that's where I am.
Two things on that. I want to say this eye test stuff is such bullcrap. Am I really to believe that all 13 of these people really have watched every snap of every team that they're evaluating? There's no freaking way. I don't want to hear about it. They're influenced by whatever highlight package that they're watching, and so on and so forth. It's just an excuse for bias. I want to correct you on one thing that you said, Isaiah. You said that nobody gave TCU a chance. I would say that the teams that gave TCU a heads up and said, hey, Michigan is checking out your hand signals, go ahead and change them. I think those people gave TCU a chance. Just a slight correction on that.
My team was one of those teams that gave TCU
Yep. They had an inkling. Okay, Robert, here's your magical slide.
Yeah. What can you say? This is literally The thing is, this entire process is ridiculous. One, you guys say, okay, it's the most deserving, and I'm fine with that, but that's never been defined. Nowhere have they ever said most deserving means best Power 5 champions with best records, because TCU got in last year. They didn't win their conference championship game. They just ignored that, apparently. Georgia was the number 1 or number 2 team all year long. They lose to an Alabama team. Okay, they're just gone now. Florida State goes undefeated. Then they say, oh, okay, your quarterback was injured, so we're not going to put you in. There is no consistency at all in any of this. I think and the thing is, there's a couple things I want to say. One of the things is that people are saying, like, oh, okay. And the argument about Jordan Travis is somewhat convincing, because it's okay, yeah, they would not, because they have that clause in there that says you have to keep into account players available. And it's actually funny, because 2 weeks ago on my deeper dive, I basically outlined almost this exact scenario. Yeah. I just assumed Georgia was going to beat Bama, and then that was going to be between Oregon, Texas, and this. Now, things worked a little bit differently, but I even said then, it would be cleaner if Florida State had lost. They didn't, and they should have gotten a chance. But the problem is, and I love the one note from one of the sports books. They said that, oh yeah, Florida State is 14-point dogs to Georgia. Also, we'd have Georgia favored over all the other 4 teams in the playoff too. And I'm like, what is the point of all of this then? If I understand the point is that, okay, we're trying to do the most deserving, but a nebulous concept that has never quite been defined. Okay, cool. But there are so many problems with this system. My biggest issue is last week's rankings. Last week's rankings were apparently just nothing. They just were completely disregarded. You have Ohio State as 6, and ahead of Texas and ahead of Alabama. So apparently, Ohio State, according to your objective measurements, is the 6th best team in the country. Cool. That's fine. You said that last week. But then Texas destroys the 24th ranked team in the country, and now suddenly they're the 3rd best team in the country. What? How? Like, how do you really think that they're a better team than Ohio State just because they destroyed the 24th ranked team in the country? Do you not think Ohio State would also have crushed the 20? That makes no sense. Then the fact is, okay, the SEC has been horrible this year. Most notably, they lost to New Mexico State. Basically a team that Bama needed to convert a literal miracle to win. The week before had gotten absolutely destroyed by New Mexico State. And you're telling me that they're one of the best 4 conferences in the game. Now, okay, yes, would Michigan probably have been massive favorites against Florida State? Yes. But I don't understand. Like, there is, and the problem is this all goes away next year. So these are never questions we're going to have answered. We're never going to figure out. Now, okay, apparently they want to sue the CFP. Don't know how well that will go. I feel like it's going to stonewall, because they're going to be like, we want everything you wrote down. People are going to be like, we didn't write anything down. Prove it. We didn't have cameras in that hotel boardroom, because of course they did, because they know what they're doing here. And the thing is, this is insane, because this is probably going to lead to the destruction of the ACC for some insane reason. This committee was, and someone pointed out to me, and I never quite realized it, thought about it this way before, but they had 4 spots for 5 Power 5 conferences. And people are like this entire process was designed to fail. This was basically betting on the fact that you would never actually have 5 good teams from 5 conferences. Each conference would only ever have 1 good team, and some years that would be bad, so then you could squeeze in 2 SEC teams or something. But this was designed to fail from the beginning. And the whole point is that we still have my power rankings, and even Kelly Ford on Twitter, shout out to them. They still have Oregon is better than Washington. We still have Ohio State is better than them. Hell, and the sports books would have Georgia's favorite over all 4 teams. What's the point in this? If we think the best 3 teams are not even in this thing, what's the point? I don't understand what the point of any of this is. I'm not saying this is, okay, we just ignore the result of head-to-head games, but what's the point if we think that the 4 teams aren't even the best teams? We're just we just put them in because of some, I don't know. It's crazy. They need to fix this, but these problems will never be fixed. And the thing is, the CFP rankings are literally just, like, when you think about it, and this is the best part, I'm calling this now, and we'll be here a year from now, and then I will definitely do a victory lap on this. because I believe it was Tulane. Yeah, Tulane was like the 22nd, 23rd, 24th ranked team on any given week. And then magically last week, Tulane loses and then Liberty overtakes them. Cool. Fun. But next year, they're going to be tasked with picking, next year, the highest ranked G5 conference winner is going to get into the college football playoff. And I suspect that magically, suddenly, they are now going to be very close to the 12th ranked team. Because these rankings mean nothing. These rankings are eye test things used to justify the top 4 rankings, because you can even clearly see it. Because when you go down through it, you're like, oh, Missouri is ranked ahead of Penn State because they need to justify putting Georgia ahead of... If you go through it, the rankings are all BS. They're now, okay, are they like they kind of make sense? Sure. But all the rankings are basically just used to justify whatever they want at the top anyway. And now next year you're just magically going to find, oh, you know what? The G5 school's a lot better than we thought it was, guys. They're actually in the top 12. They're not in the 20s. Don't worry. They're like 10th. It's fine, guys. It's ridiculous. And there's going to be huge fights about, not nationally, but people like us are going to be massive. We're going to be like, this G5 team should be in. This G5 team should be in, right? So, like... I really want a definition of like how they even we've heard vague things like, oh, they have an ESPN FPI chart or something, or they look at strength of schedule numbers or ranked wins, even though that's useless, and vague platitudes like a loss can never be worth less than it was at the beginning. But that also is just dumb because that doesn't make any sense at all. I want a defined criteria of what the hell these people are actually doing. 'Cause then we randomly hear Kirk Herbstreit saying, oh, you like put things in pairs and trios. I'm like, what the hell does that even mean? I'd never heard this before. What is this? Oh, we pick the first 3, then we pick the next 3. I'm like, where does that come from? Who decided that system? I don't understand how any of this works, and I would really like to understand how they even come up with any of this at all.
So the one thing, too, I will say the worst thing that they do for their credibility are those weekly shows. Is the worst thing that they can do. Because what they're trying to do is they're trying to generate engagement, and they're trying to generate controversy, and they're trying to generate storylines. But at the end of the day, it is not like college basketball where you can do bracketology and you have so many data points because they're playing multiple times a week and they're having multiple upsets a week, and it works out even though the big bracketologists don't know what they're doing either. But that doesn't work in college football. So you end up getting these rankings where they're trying to fish themselves to an end narrative, but then you get something like this week or last week before the championship game played out where they bet on themselves and they bet on what the outcome was going to be, and they were wrong. They bet on Washington winning or on Oregon winning. They were wrong. They bet on Georgia winning. They were wrong. And that's what happens when you try to create a narrative in a sport that doesn't care about your narrative. And it's unfortunate because I know a ton of people who are saying it's fine. This is only happening because it's a 14 playoff and it's going to be fixed when we have 12. And I'm like, no, it's not. Because right now we're arguing about undefeated Florida State and 1-loss Alabama, and it's just going to end up changing to we're going to be arguing about 2-loss Clemson and 3-loss Ole Miss. And they're going to put 3-loss Ole Miss in.
Yeah. And this is the other thing, too, is that right now everybody's arguing about, oh, should the injury to Jordan Travis affect it? Yes, no. What if, and again, far more likely, he wasn't injured? Everything else plays out exactly the same, except then they beat Florida by a bigger margin and they beat Louisville by a bigger margin. What are we talking about then? Because you even have a clip. There was a clip on ESPN Game Day where Kirk Herbstreit even said, oh, you can't exclude the SEC champion. This was before Jordan Travis was even injured. And then are you going to then justify putting in Bama ahead of Texas? I know an entire state of, I think, 30 million or so people who'd be very upset, or no, 20-some million people who'd be very upset about that. Someone was going to get screwed. If you're ESPN and you've offered all this money for Texas to go to the SEC, I don't think you're going to upset them. I think, and again, right now we hear, oh, it's Jordan Travis, the injury. I think there's a very real possibility that if things had worked out slightly different, we'd be hearing, the ACC just wasn't that good this year.
Yeah.
Miami let them down. North Carolina let them down. So you had 3 losses. They lost to Bama too. We just couldn't put. I think we were so close to hearing the other end of that argument as well.
And the last thing I'll say too on Herbstreit is he spent the entire season, because he's an OSU guy. He spent the entire season about, oh yeah, I know they don't look very good, but just win out. If you win out, you're in. And then all of a sudden, he starts firing off tweets about how this is the right decision. It stinks, but this is the right. So I'm just like, boy, I want to know at ESPN who told him to shut his mouth and change his tune, because he changed real fast.
Yep.
And it's so crazy with Oregon lost to Washington in the regular season, just like Ohio State lost to Michigan. But what happened was, because the Pac-12 doesn't have divisions, because Oregon and Washington used to be in the same division, a couple of years ago, that would have been Washington going on to play Arizona or something. Oregon would never have had a chance to revenge that loss. Ohio State had to sit on the sidelines to see a horrible Iowa team get destroyed by Michigan. So they had no chance to even win. Now, okay, obviously Oregon had a chance. They didn't avenge the loss. Okay, that's sad for them. But what happens if Ohio State comes back this week, beats a very likely result because they had to play Michigan in their stadium? They come back, beat Michigan. That just throws all this into chaos as well, right? The fact is that they decide to use, and this is one of the reasons why Texas was probably ranked ahead of Ohio State, they decide to use conference champions as a tiebreaker. It's basically just like it's a side quest in a video game. Like, oh, Ohio State wasn't allowed to complete the conference championship side quest because they lost that random game, but Oregon was. So therefore, we have a chance. Like, it's ridiculous. It's not. It's just such a dumb way to decide literally any of this that it's just they need to fix this, and they need to have objective criteria in the future.
Agree. So I'll wrap up on just three things that were brought up. Robert, you said you don't know how the lawsuit will go. I have a pretty good idea. It'll be about as successful as that idiot who owned Maximum Security suing over being disqualified in the Kentucky Derby, and the Saints fans who sued over that pass interference non-call. What was that, like in 2019 or 2020? I think that'll go about the same way there. What do you want to bet just that Liberty will be the first/highest ranked G5 team next year? Because these dopes just only know the thing that's most recently in front of their face. I'm pretty confident in that. Lastly, why do all these bad things happen? Let's just not forget that the ACC, they actually did themselves in. They were one of the holdouts that kept us from having a 12-team playoff this year. And the problem is this entire sport is run by idiots. Having said that, and with the ironically, in this case, unfortunately named Thank You College Football, that ends our look back at the last week.